Lieutenant Commander Kieran Voss had been trained for many scenarios, but becoming a prisoner of war wasn't one of them. The Zinthri Empire's detention facility orbiting Proxima Centauri was designed to break spirits rather than bodies, not that the Zinthri particularly cared about preserving human physiology. They viewed humans as fragile, primitive mammals who had somehow stumbled onto faster-than-light travel before developing proper caution. "Enhanced interrogation commencing," announced the monotone voice of the facility's AI. Kieran tensed against his restraints. 3 days of this, and still he hadn't broken. His body was a map of bruises and lacerations, but his mind remained his own. The Zinthri had already extracted what little tactical information he possessed, yet they continued, seemingly fascinated by his resistance. "Quite remarkable," came a new voice, silken and cold. "Most species require chemical intervention by this point." The room's ambient lighting shifted from harsh white to a deep violet, the color of Zinthri royalty. Kieran blinked through the sweat stinging his eyes to see a tall, imposing figure enter. Unlike the gray-skinned, utilitarian soldiers who had been his constant companions, this Zinthri moved with predatory grace. Her exoskeleton gleamed with the iridescent blue-black of deep space, adorned with silver markings of high military rank. "Fleet Admiral Thalassa," the guard announced, immediately straightening his posture. Kieran recognized the name from intelligence briefings. Thalassa had led the devastating attack on the Saturn colonies that had killed over 30,000 civilians. Her tactical brilliance was matched only by her ruthlessness. She approached, her four-fingered hand reaching out to tilt his chin upward. Her touch was surprisingly warm against his chilled skin. "So this is humanity's finest?" Thalassa's violet eyes narrowed, multifaceted like those of an insect but unmistakably intelligent. "Tell me, Lieutenant Commander Voss, why do you persist? Your species has no natural armor, no secondary hearts, no redundant organ systems. Your bones break under minimal pressure. Your skin tears with shocking ease." Kieran mustered what remained of his strength to meet her gaze. "Maybe that's why we fight harder." A sound emerged from Thalassa that might have been laughter. "Fascinating. You believe struggle makes you stronger? The galaxy doesn't reward struggle, human. It rewards evolutionary superiority." And yet, Kieran managed through cracked lips, "Your mighty empire felt threatened enough by us to launch a preemptive strike." The Admiral's mandibles clicked in what Kieran was beginning to recognize as amusement. "Preventative pest control, nothing more. Though I admit, your species has proven more resilient than anticipated." She circled him slowly, assessing. Her exoskeleton plates shifted with her movement, revealing glimpses of softer tissue beneath, a vulnerability rarely displayed in Zinthri culture. "Your fleet is scattered. Your colonies are falling. Earth itself will soon be under our control," she continued. "Yet individual humans continue to resist beyond all reason or biological likelihood." Kieran said nothing. The latest reports before his capture had indeed been grim, but Thalassa didn't need to know about the contingency plans, the hidden shipyards, or the alliances forming with other species who feared Zinthri expansion. Thalassa gestured, and a holographic display materialized, showing footage of human soldiers in battle. "Your kind uses ingenious tactics to compensate for physical weakness. You adapt common materials into effective weapons. You sacrifice individuals willingly for collective advantage." Her head tilted. "Most curious of all, you experience fear. I can smell it on you now, yet you override your instincts." She leaned closer, her breath cool against his ear. "I've requested your transfer to my command ship. Consider it an honor. I rarely take personal interest in inferior species." "Why?" Kieran asked, suspicion cutting through his exhaustion. "Call it scientific curiosity. Perhaps understanding humanity's peculiar psychological fortitude will hasten your species' surrender." Her clawed finger traced the line of his jaw. Or perhaps I simply enjoy watching you struggle against the inevitable." As Thalassa turned to leave, Kieran called after her, "Admiral?" She paused at the threshold. "Humans have a saying, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger." He managed a bloodied smile. "You might want to kill us all while you still can." Thalassa's mandibles clicked once more. Bold words from a specimen in restraints. "We shall see what remains of your spirit after you've spent time in my personal laboratory, Lieutenant Commander Voss." As the door sealed behind her, Kieran allowed himself to sag against his bonds. The Admiral's interest was dangerous, but it was also an opportunity. If he could get closer to the inner workings of the Zinthri command structure, if he could gather intelligence on their weaknesses, perhaps humanity's chances weren't as grim as Thalassa believed. He just needed to survive whatever the Admiral had planned for him. 3 weeks aboard Thalassa's command vessel, the Inexorable, had given Kieran more intelligence than any human operative had managed to gather since the war began. Though kept in comfortable captivity, he was studied, tested, and questioned daily by the Admiral herself. She seemed determined to understand what made humans persist against overwhelming odds. Each session ended with the same clinical assessment: humans were evolutionary oddities, adaptable but ultimately doomed. He was mapping the ship's layout in his mind, and the first impact rocked the Inexorable. "Battle stations," came the immediate ship-wide announcement. "Human fleet detected." "This is not a drill." Kieran's cell door remained sealed, but the guard assigned to him had abandoned his post. Through the small viewport, he watched as a stunning sight unfolded: dozens of human vessels, including classes he'd never seen before, emerging from what appeared to be artificially generated wormholes. "Impossible," he whispered. The technology to create stable micro-wormholes had been theoretical when he was captured. The ship lurched again. Emergency lighting engaged as artificial gravity fluctuated. When the door to his cell suddenly slid open during a power surge, Kieran didn't hesitate. He slipped into the corridor, using the chaos to make his way toward the escape pods. He rounded a corner and collided with Thalassa. The Admiral's typically immaculate appearance was compromised: a crack in her exoskeleton leaked phosphorescent fluid, and her silver insignia was smeared with soot. Her violet eyes narrowed upon seeing him. "Of course you'd attempt escape during a crisis," she said, mandibles clicking in irritation. "Opportunistic, like all your kind." "Your ship is taking critical damage," Kieran replied, hands raised in a placating gesture. "I'm just trying to survive." Another explosion rocked the vessel, throwing them both against the bulkhead. A section of ceiling collapsed, narrowly missing them. "Engineering reports complete drive failure," came a panicked voice over Thalassa's communication device. "Hull breach on decks 3 through 7. Recommend immediate evacuation." Thalassa's composed expression faltered for the first time since Kieran had met her. "Impossible. The human fleet shouldn't have this capability." "Maybe you underestimated us," Kieran suggested, unable to keep a note of pride from his voice. The ship pitched violently. From the viewport at the end of the corridor, Kieran could see they were being pulled into the gravity well of a nearby moon. Thalassa consulted her wrist device, mandibles clicking rapidly, a sign of stress Kieran had learned to recognize. "All escape pods have launched or been destroyed," she said, voice tight. "We need to reach my personal shuttle." "We?" Kieran raised an eyebrow. "Would you prefer to die here, human?" Thalassa gestured to the deteriorating corridor. With no better options, Kieran followed her through the labyrinthine passages of the dying ship. They dodged falling debris and sealed off sections where explosive decompression threatened. Twice they encountered other Zinthri crew members, who regarded Kieran with shock but deferred to Thalassa's authority without question. The shuttle bay was chaos, damaged vessels and desperate crew members fighting for the few functioning craft. Thalassa led him to a sleek, heavily armored shuttle in a private dock. "Get in," she ordered, her tone allowing no argument. The shuttle detached from the inexorable moments before the command ship split apart in a spectacular explosion. Kieran watched through the viewport as the battle continued above them, but Thalassa had already programmed a descent trajectory toward the moon below. Eridani 4, she said, noticing his questioning look. Mining outpost. Minimal strategic value, but it has breathable atmosphere for both our species. Why am I here? Kieran finally asked as they entered the moon's turbulent atmosphere. You could have left me to die. Thalassa's multifaceted eyes fixed on him. You are still a research subject of interest. Your value to the Empire has not diminished. The Empire that's currently getting its ass handed to it by my primitive species? Her clawed hand moved with blinding speed, stopping just short of his throat. Do not mistake tactical retreat for defeat, human. This battle is merely one engagement in a war your kind cannot ultimately win. The shuttle bucked violently as they hit a storm system. Thalassa turned her attention back to the controls, her exoskeletal fingers dancing across the interface. Kieran noted how the damage to her side was worsening, the crack in her exoskeleton had expanded, leaking more luminescent fluid. You're injured, he said. It is superficial. That's not what your physiology indicates, Kieran countered. During his weeks of study, he'd been studied in return. Your secondary circulatory system is compromised. Thalassa's mandibles clicked once in surprise. Your observational skills are impressive, if unwelcome. The shuttle broke through the cloud cover, revealing a desolate, rocky landscape below. Before Thalassa could stabilize their descent, a projectile streaked up from the surface, catching the rear of their vessel. Surface-to-air defenses, Thalassa muttered. Both our forces must have automated systems here. They spiraled downward, the shuttle's controls responding sluggishly. Kieran instinctively grabbed for the co-pilot interface, his naval training kicking in. Let me help, he said urgently. I've piloted in atmospheres like this. For a moment, he thought Thalassa would refuse. Then, with a sound that might have been a curse in her native language, she shifted to give him access to the secondary controls. Together, Human and Zinthari fought against the failing systems, bringing the shuttle into a rough but controlled landing that sent them skidding across the rocky terrain before coming to a stop near a ridge of jagged mountains. As the dust settled and emergency systems engaged, they sat in silence, both processing the unlikely reality of their situation. Enemies, now stranded together on a contested moon, both leaking different colored blood, both far from their respective fleets. We will need to cooperate to survive until extraction, Thalassa finally said, her voice formal but strained with pain. Kieran nodded slowly. Agreed. And Admiral? I'll help treat that wound, if you'll let me. I had medical training before I was a pilot. Thalassa regarded him with an unreadable expression. Perhaps humanity's adaptability has some practical applications after all. Outside the viewport, twin moons rose over the alien landscape, bathing their crash site in ethereal light. Above them, the battle for control of the system raged on, but down here, on this desolate moon, different rules would need to apply. 5 days on Eridani 4 had taught Thalassa more about humans than all her previous research combined. She watched as Kieran fashioned a water filtration system from damaged shuttle components and local minerals, his dexterous fingers working with a precision that belied his species' supposed clumsiness. Your wound is healing well, he commented, glancing at her repaired exoskeleton. He had used the shuttle's emergency medical supplies combined with a resin he'd extracted from native plants to seal the crack. Due to Zinthari regenerative capabilities, she replied automatically, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. Without his intervention, infection would have set in days ago. Their shelter was a marvel of improvisation, the damaged shuttle repositioned against a cliff face, reinforced with local materials to protect against the moon's extreme temperature fluctuations and occasional acid rain. Each night, they huddled near the small heat generator, taking turns monitoring the communications array Kieran had rebuilt to amplify their distress signal. "Your kind builds with remarkable efficiency," Thalassa observed as Kieran reinforced a section of their shelter against the coming storm. "It's as though you expect structures to fail and plan accordingly." Kieran paused, wiping sweat from his brow. The gesture fascinated her, the cooling mechanism so different from her species' temperature regulation. "That's because on Earth, they do fail," he explained. "Earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, our entire history is adapting to environments trying to kill us. Yet you expanded beyond your world before mastering it." "We didn't want to master it," Kieran said, returning to his work. "We wanted to understand it, live with it. There's a difference." Thalassa considered this as she inventoried their dwindling supplies. The Zinthari approach had always been domination, of environments, of technology, of other species. The Empire's philosophy was rooted in the evolutionary supremacy that had made her people the apex predators of their homeworld. That night, as acidic rain pounded their shelter, Thalassa found herself studying Kieran's sleeping form. Humans were so exposed without natural armor, yet this vulnerability had driven them to create, to connect, to persist. In sleep, with his guard down, she could see the toll their situation was taking, new lines around his eyes, his frame leaner after days of ration provisions. "Why do you watch me sleep?" Kieran's voice startled her. His eyes opened, alert despite apparent rest. "Scientific observation," she replied, mandibles clicking in what she hoped conveyed professional detachment rather than the strange fascination she was developing. Kieran sat up, running a hand through his hair, another peculiarly human gesture. "You know, for all your talk of evolutionary superiority, your people aren't so different from mine." An absurd statement. "Is it?" He moved closer, his body radiating heat she could feel even through her exoskeleton. "We both formed societies, developed technologies, reached for the stars. We both create art, value knowledge, form attachments. Zinthari attachments are pragmatic. Strategic alliances for mutual benefit. And yet," Kieran's voice softened, "you saved me from your ship. You've shared resources equally. You speak to me now not as a captor, but as..." "As what?" Thalassa found herself leaning slightly toward him, drawn by something she couldn't articulate. "As someone trying to understand." The storm intensified outside, rattling their makeshift home. A section of ceiling began to leak, and they moved in unison to seal it, her strength and his ingenuity combining seamlessly. Their hands brushed, and Thalassa felt an unusual electrical sensation where his skin met her exoskeleton. "Your internal temperature is elevated," she noted, scientific curiosity overriding her sudden discomfort. "Yours too," he countered, bold in a way that would have earned punishment aboard her ship. "Your thoracic plates are expanded for heat dissipation." They remained close, the repair complete but neither moving away. Thalassa's scientific mind catalogued the physiological changes, her own accelerated heartbeats, the dilation of his pupils, the synchronizing of their breathing patterns. "This is inappropriate," she finally said, though she made no move to increase the distance between them. "By whose standards? The empire that's billions of kilometers away? The same empire that wrote off this moon as having minimal strategic value?" "By the natural order," she replied, less conviction in her tone than she'd intended. "Our species are not compatible." Kieran's laugh was soft, unexpected. "I think that's what makes this interesting, Admiral. We're not supposed to be compatible, and yet here we are, surviving together better than either of us would alone." His hand moved slowly, deliberately, giving her ample time to retreat as his fingers traced the edge of her facial plates where they met softer tissue. The sensation was electric, intensely intimate in Zinthari culture. Instead of recoiling, she found herself leaning into his touch. "Your species' persistence is perplexing," she murmured, her own clawed hand hesitantly reaching to touch the exposed skin at his neck, feeling his pulse quicken beneath her fingers. Maybe we just recognize something worth fighting for when we see it, he replied, voice husky. The line between scientific curiosity and forbidden attraction blurred entirely as they moved closer. Their first kiss was an experiment, her mandibles carefully controlled, his lips gentle against the sensitive areas of her face. The second was more confident, a mutual exploration of the possible. What followed was a revelation for both. Their physiological differences became points of discovery rather than division. Where her exoskeleton was hard, his touch was soft, where his skin was vulnerable, her caress was careful. They mapped new territories of sensation, finding unexpected harmony in their contrasts. In the aftermath, as they lay entwined in the small sleeping area, the storm outside finally subsiding, Thalassa found herself experiencing an unfamiliar emotion. It wasn't just physical satisfaction or scientific fascination, it was something more profound, something that challenged the fundamental beliefs upon which she had built her existence. The Empire would consider this treason, she whispered against his shoulder. Kieran's fingers traced the luminescent patterns along her arm, patterns that had brightened during their intimacy. And what do you consider it? Thalassa was silent for a long moment, her analytical mind wrestling with emotions she had been taught to suppress. I consider it evidence that perhaps the natural order is more complex than I was led to believe. Above them, through a gap in their shelter's roof, distant explosions illuminated the sky, the war continuing without them. But down here, something had fundamentally shifted, a private revolution as significant as any battlefield victory. The Zinthri extraction team arrived first. Kieran had been foraging in the nearby ravine when he heard the distinctive hum of Imperial shuttles. He watched from concealment as Thalassa was retrieved, her composed, authoritative demeanor instantly returning as she gave orders to her subordinates. She made no mention of him, though her eyes scanned the surrounding terrain before boarding. 3 days later, a human special operations team followed their distress beacon, finding Kieran alone in the shelter he and Thalassa had built together. Commander Voss, the team leader, greeted him with a crisp salute. Your survival is a testament to human resilience. Intelligence will be eager to debrief you on your time in Zinthri captivity. Kieran nodded, gathering the few possessions he had accumulated. He hesitated at the small crystalline formation Thalassa had given him, a rare mineral found only on the Zinthri homeworld, which she had worn as an insignia of her house. He pocketed it and followed the rescue team. The intelligence you've provided is invaluable, Admiral Chen told him after 3 days of intensive debriefing at the Hidden Human Command Center on Europa. Ship layouts, command structures, weapons capabilities, and most significantly, the location of their primary shipyards. Kieran stood at rigid attention, trying to ignore the gnawing discomfort in his chest. He had told them everything, almost everything. The technical details, the strategic information, the vulnerabilities he had observed aboard the Inexorable. He had omitted only the most private moments on Eridani 4. We're launching a major offensive, Chen continued, bringing up a holographic battle plan. Your information on their defensive algorithms has allowed us to create a targeting system they won't be able to counter. Casualties? Kieran asked, his voice carefully neutral. Chen gave him an appraising look. Significant for them. Minimal for us. That's the point, Commander. Of course, sir. Kieran studied the battle plan. The target was Rigel Prime, a major Zinthri command hub, where Thalassa would almost certainly be stationed after her rescue. You'll be leading Phoenix Squadron, Chen added. Your first-hand experience with their tactics makes you uniquely qualified. Kieran accepted his new orders with a salute, his mind racing. He had sworn an oath to humanity, to protect Earth and her colonies. The information he had provided would save countless human lives. But as he reviewed the mission parameters in his quarters that night, he found himself turning Thalassa's crystal over and over in his fingers. Their time together had revealed complexities in both their species that defied the simple narratives of war. The battle for Rigel Prime unfolded exactly as planned. Human forces struck with precision, disabled the Zinthri defense grid using the vulnerabilities Kieran had identified, and systematically destroyed their orbital installations. From the command deck of his vessel, Kieran directed Phoenix Squadron through the chaos, executing the battle plan flawlessly while inwardly flinching at each Zinthri ship that erupted into flames. He kept scanning for the distinctive configuration of an admiral's command vessel. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "we're detecting a high-priority target attempting to retreat through the southern quadrant." The holographic display showed a sleek vessel breaking formation, Thalassa's personal command ship. Kieran recognized it instantly. "I'll handle this one," he said, taking manual control of his fighter. "Continue with the primary objectives." He pursued the vessel into an asteroid field, using the natural cover to drop from sensor detection before establishing a secure, encrypted communication channel. "Fleet Admiral Thalassa," he transmitted. "This is Lieutenant Commander Voss." There was a long pause before her image appeared on his screen. Her posture was rigid, her expression glacial. "You used our time together well, Commander," she said, her voice clipped. The Empire was not prepared for such a precisely targeted assault. "I did my duty," Kieran replied, the words tasting bitter. "As did you, I'm sure, when you returned to your command." "Of course. Did you expect sentimentality to override generations of evolutionary programming?" Despite her cold tone, Kieran noticed the luminescent patterns on her exoskeleton brightening, the involuntary reaction he had come to recognize during their most intimate moments. "I expected nothing," he said. "But I'm transmitting coordinates now. A clear path out of the battle zone." Thalassa's multifaceted eyes narrowed. "Why would you do this?" "Because what happened on Eridani 4 wasn't just survival or scientific curiosity," Kieran said, allowing the facade of military detachment to fall away. "And I think you know that. You betrayed information that will cost Zinthri lives," she countered, though her mandibles clicked in what he now recognized as emotional conflict. "And I'm saving at least one Zinthri now," he replied. "War makes traitors of us all, Thalassa. The question is what we betray, and why." Another lengthy silence. The battle continued to rage around them, but in this small pocket of space, time seemed suspended. "Your species continues to confound logical analysis," she finally said, the formal tone softening almost imperceptibly. "The coordinated attack pattern should have elicited a survival response: retreat, regroup. Instead, I find myself reluctant to leave this sector." "Then don't," Kieran said, his heart rate accelerating. "Meet me. Not as Admiral and Commander. Not as Zinthri and human." "Where?" "Neutral territory. The independent trading station at Arcturus. 3 cycles from now." He was taking an enormous risk. Meeting an enemy officer during active warfare was treason by any military standard. But the rules that had governed his life before Eridani 4 seemed increasingly arbitrary in the face of what he had discovered there. "Such a meeting would contradict everything I have ever been taught about the natural order," Thalassa said, her image flickering as her ship began to move along the escape vector he had provided. "Maybe it's time for a new order," Kieran suggested. Her ship accelerated, breaking communication. Kieran watched it disappear from his sensors, uncertainty gnawing at him. Had he just compromised the human war effort for a connection that existed only in his imagination? The independent trading station at Arcturus was a sprawling complex of interlocking habitats and docking bays, populated by dozens of species that maintained neutrality in the human-Zinthri conflict. Kieran had requested leave under the pretense of visiting a specialist for persistent injuries from his time in captivity. He sat at a small table in the observation lounge, watching the busy spaceport traffic, certain with each passing moment that she wouldn't come. That duty, logic, and loyalty to her species had prevailed. He didn't notice her at first. She had exchanged her admiral's regalia for civilian attire, still distinctly Zinthri but lacking military insignia. Without the imposing uniform, her natural elegance was even more apparent. She sat across from him without a word, her luminescent patterns pulsing in a rhythm he had come to recognize as anticipation mixed with apprehension. "You're taking an enormous risk," he said quietly. "As are you." Her multifaceted eyes studied him intently. "I told my command I was pursuing a promising research opportunity. And I'm supposedly seeing a medical specialist." Kieran smiled wryly. "Neither of us is lying, exactly." Thalassa's mandibles clicked once in dry amusement. "I've been analyzing our encounter on Eridani 4. Attempting to categorize it within established parameters. And it defies categorization." Her clawed hand moved slowly across the table until it rested near his, not quite touching, but close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her exoskeleton. Which is most troubling for a species that bases its entire society on taxonomic certainty. Kieran bridged the small distance between their hands, his fingers brushing against hers. The electric sensation was just as powerful as he remembered. "Maybe some things aren't meant to be categorized," he suggested. They moved from the public lounge to a private suite, neutral territory where the boundaries between enemy combatants dissolved into something more primal, more honest. Their second joining was more urgent than the first, the uncertainty of their future lending intensity to each touch, each discovery. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the strange synchronicity their different bodies had somehow found, Thalassa traced the scars on his torso, some from battle, some from his time in Zinthri captivity. "The next time we meet might be across a battlefield," she said, her usual clinical tone softened by something like regret. Kieran pulled her closer, his fingers finding the sensitive junctures of her exoskeleton that made her luminescence flare. "Or it might be at a peace negotiation." "Unlikely. The Empire does not negotiate with evolutionarily inferior species." And yet, Kieran smiled against the smooth surface of her thoracic plate, an Imperial Admiral just defied probability, biology, and military protocol to meet with one such inferior creature. Thalassa was silent for a long moment, her secondary breathing apparatus creating a soothing rhythm against his chest. "Perhaps," she finally said, "the parameters by which we judge superiority require reassessment." It wasn't a declaration of love, that concept might not even translate across their different neurological systems. But in the context of their worlds, it was revolutionary. The war entered its third year with a shifting balance of power. Human innovation continued to confound Zinthri military doctrine, while imperial numbers and resources wore down human defenses. Neither side could claim decisive victory, and the mounting casualties forced both civilizations to confront an uncomfortable truth: this was a war of attrition neither could ultimately win. Kieran and Thalassa had met 7 more times in the relative safety of neutral territories, space stations, independent colonies, and once on the same desolate moon where their relationship had begun. Each reunion was intense, desperate, and shadowed by the knowledge that their loyalties remained divided. Their 8th meeting was different. Kieran arrived at the designated coordinates in the Tau Ceti system to find not just Thalassa waiting, but 3 senior members of the Zinthri High Command. "Is this a trap?" he asked her through their secure channel, his hand hovering over the emergency evacuation controls. "It is a reckoning," Thalassa replied, her voice carrying none of the warmth he had come to cherish. "The Empire has questions about our communication patterns." Kieran's ship was directed to dock with the Zinthri vessel. He considered fleeing, but the presence of only one warship suggested this wasn't a conventional ambush. Against all military protocol and common sense, he completed the docking procedure. Thalassa met him in the airlock, her posture formal, her admiral's regalia immaculate. Only the subtle pulsing of her luminescent patterns, visible only to someone intimately familiar with Zinthri physiology, betrayed her tension. "They know," she said simply. "Everything?" "Enough." She led him through the corridor to a conference room where 3 Zinthri officials waited, their exoskeletons adorned with the intricate markings of the Imperial Council. Lieutenant Commander Voss, the eldest Zinthri, acknowledged him with a formal gesture. "I am High Counselor Zenther. My colleagues and I have been reviewing Fleet Admiral Thalassa's unorthodox research methods." Kieran maintained a neutral expression. "I wasn't aware my captivity qualified as research." "Your initial captivity, no," another counselor interjected. "But your subsequent interactions have yielded fascinating data regarding human Zinthri compatibility." Kieran glanced at Thalassa, whose mandibles were clicking in subtle patterns he had learned to read as discomfort. "I think we can dispense with euphemisms," he said boldly. "If you're here to charge us with treason, proceed." "Treason?" Zenther's multifaceted eyes glimmered with what might have been amusement. "No, Commander. We are here to discuss peace." The statement was so unexpected that Kieran momentarily lost his composure. Peace? After 3 years of asserting human evolutionary inferiority? "Evolution is adaptable," the third counselor spoke for the first time. "Those who cannot adjust to new evidence do not survive. The Empire has always prided itself on pragmatism." Thalassa moved to stand beside Kieran, close enough that their arms almost touched. "The Council has been monitoring our communications. They are aware of our—" She hesitated, "personal research. And far from being aberrant, you have inadvertently pioneered a potential new paradigm," Zenther continued. "One that suggests cooperation rather than domination might be the next evolutionary step." "The war has reached an unsustainable equilibrium," the second counselor added. "Your species' ingenuity counters our superior resources. The logical conclusion is negotiation." Kieran looked at each Zinthri face, searching for deception. "And I'm supposed to believe that the Empire has suddenly abandoned generations of biological supremacist ideology because of a few secret rendezvous?" "Not entirely," Thalassa replied. "But your insights into our command structures, combined with my observations of human adaptability, have circulated through upper echelons of both our military hierarchies. Others have reached similar conclusions about the war's futility." Zenther activated a holographic display showing recent battle statistics. 7 major engagements in the past month have ended in stalemate. Both sides are developing countermeasures faster than new tactical advantages. The logical conclusion is that our species are too evenly matched for conventional victory. And it took 3 years of bloodshed to reach this logical conclusion? Kieran couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. "Evolution requires pressure," Thalassa said quietly. "Without the war, neither of our species would have been forced to truly see the other." Kieran turned to her, studying the face that had become as familiar to him as his own reflection. "And what exactly do you see now?" "Potential," she answered simply. "Beyond conflict. Beyond separate evolutionary paths." The meeting extended for hours as preliminary terms were discussed. The Zinthri proposed a cessation of hostilities, followed by diplomatic exchanges and eventually, integrated research initiatives. Kieran, though not officially authorized to negotiate for humanity, provided insights into what terms Earth might accept. "Your military will want assurances against future aggression," Thalassa noted. "As will yours," Kieran replied. "Trust doesn't come easily after what we've done to each other." "Then perhaps," Zenther suggested, "we need visible symbols of that trust. Unprecedented collaborations to demonstrate the possibility of harmony." The implication hung in the air between them. Kieran and Thalassa exchanged a glance that communicated volumes: hope, uncertainty, possibility. The peace negotiations took place on Earth's moon, neutral ground that acknowledged both humanity's home and the Zinthri respect for celestial bodies. Kieran attended as part of the human delegation, promoted to captain for his exceptional intelligence work that had helped bring the Empire to the table. Thalassa led the Zinthri diplomatic corps, her new title of peace emissary carrying more influence than her previous military rank. They maintained professional distance during the formal proceedings, but their prior connection was an open secret among the senior negotiators. What had begun as a forbidden liaison had become an unexpected symbol of possibility, proof that the seemingly unbridgeable differences between their species could be overcome. On the final day of negotiations, as representatives from both sides signed the historic accords, Thalassa approached Kieran at the observation deck overlooking the Earth. "Your world is beautiful," she said, her mandibles clicking gently. "So much water, so much chaos. It explains much about your species." "And what does it explain?" Kieran asked, allowing himself to stand closer to her than diplomatic protocol strictly advised. "Why you fight so hard for connection?" She turned to face him fully. "The Council has approved my request for an extended diplomatic posting to Earth." Kieran's pulse quickened. "In what capacity?" "Cultural exchange. Specifically, a study of human bonding rituals and social structures." Her luminescent patterns brightened in the pattern he had come to recognize as anticipation. "I will require a knowledgeable guide." "I might know someone suitable," Kieran replied, smiling. "Though I should warn you, human bonding rituals can be quite involved. The research could take years." "I have always been thorough in my studies," Thalassa said, her clawed hand finding his in the shadow of the viewport. "The Empire has authorized indefinite resources for this particular project." Outside, Earth rotated serenely beneath them, blue and green and white, oblivious to how close it had come to destruction. Beyond the lunar station, the first joint human-Zinthari research vessels were being constructed, crewed by those from both species willing to forge a new path. "What do you think they'll discover out there?" Kieran asked, nodding toward the shipyards. Thalassa's mandibles clicked in what he now recognized as her version of a smile. "If our experience is any indication, that the universe favors adaptation over domination. That strength takes many forms. That what begins as scientific curiosity can evolve into something far more profound." "That doesn't sound very scientific, Admiral," he teased, using her former title affectionately. "Science evolves, Captain Voss," she replied, the formal address contrasting with the intimate way her exoskeleton plates shifted to accommodate his closeness. "As do we all." Their silhouettes merged against the backdrop of Earth as ambassadors and officials discreetly looked away. In the new galactic order taking shape around them, theirs would not be the only unexpected union, but it would always be remembered as the first, the one that proved that even the most different species could find common ground when they looked beyond preconceptions to see the strength in each other's differences. Above them, stars beckoned, not as territories to conquer, but as possibilities to explore together. The war that had begun with dismissal and contempt had forged something neither species could have achieved alone, a future limited only by their willingness to evolve beyond what they had once believed possible.